This is NFA Talk, the show that talks about guns and gun rights, keeping you up to date with what's currently going on, from the newest guns, promotions, and events, plus how we're lobbying for your rights.
Hey, it's time for another NFA Talk. Tonight joining me is Sheldon Clare. I've also got with me Rob Boutilier. Hey guys, how's it going?
Pretty good, Jordan.
Fantastic, Jordan. Hi, Rob. Really great to meet you.
Yeah, first time.
Yes. I mean, we've certainly been traveling in similar circles.
Yeah, definitely.
I like your studio. That's a pretty cool setup. How long did it take you to do that?
Well, as far as labor goes, it took me a long time. So the flag behind me, I made that by hand, and then the table beside me, I made that by hand as well. So there's quite a few hours invested in building stuff, and even the wall. It's I set up the wall just for the studio and everything too. So it took me a little bit of time, but as far as cost goes, it was relatively cheap to do.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't that expensive.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad.
That's good. I mean, like for me, I've got this green screen here, so nobody can see my messy house, and it costs probably about $100. I mean, Jordan, you're probably in a similar situation.
Yeah, we have the same green screen, so
yeah,
it wasn't too expensive. It gives us an opportunity to change our backgrounds on the fly. We're doing many different things, so we change our backgrounds accordingly. I just want to circle back though. Like I asked you guys how you're doing, and you both said you're doing great. But I mean, have you seen what's going on in the media and what this government's trying to do to us? Like C-21, how could you guys be fine? And like Rob, I was talking to you earlier, and you say you just got 2 new pistols.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
What's it like in your municipality? What's your municipality going to say about the handgun ban that's coming up?
Well, I'd say I'm very safe, Jordan. I'm in Fort McMurray, Alberta. I'm right in the heart of conservatism right here. And actually, Shane Getson mentioned that provincially they're going to be putting in some measures that municipalities can't ban handguns. Yeah. So I think as far as Alberta goes, I think we're really good, but I'm really concerned for the rest of Canada and what some of these really, really left-wing cities start doing to people, right? And it's just going to be a big mess. It's going to be a huge mess for everybody.
I think so too. One of the things we're going to have to see is how much of a backbone the provinces have over this issue. I mean, that's really where this is going to cut the road, because it's pretty clear in the division of powers that in Section 92, municipalities are creations of the province. The federal government doesn't get to start regulating or giving stuff to municipalities, and they've gone around it in a bit of a sneaky way. But they need to understand that this is a provincial thing, and that the provinces have ultimately got a long record of being angry at federal interference in provincial affairs. So we'll see how that plays out.
Now, one thing that I do wonder about that handgun piece, though, that it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it's definitely better than where they would have gone, but how I'm just curious why they would have completely outlawed everything else and then flip the script on handguns and say that they're going to leave it to the municipalities. I mean, they fall into the restricted bucket. There's not really a separation in the type of firearm they are. It just seemed weird to me that they took that approach.
This is about getting everything ultimately, Rob. I mean, if you look at collectors, for example, which are people who buy and collect a theme or a particular brand or some such aspect of a firearm. If you were a handgun collector, for example, there's no provision for you to take your handguns and store them at a range. I mean, if these aren't firearms you're shooting, and many collectors do shoot their firearms, don't want to pretend that isn't the case. But certainly, if you're someone who has them to admire and study and examine these firearms, well, there's no real option for you except to move out of that city, because if that's what this is, well, okay. And then the other thing that I think is crazy about this is what happens if you're busy getting posted by your company to a new city, and you get moved from Fort McMurray all the way to say Toronto or some such place, and there's a handgun ban. And this, I think, flies in the face of your mobility rights in the Constitution, because all of a sudden you're not allowed to move with your property to a particular new location, because this is all of a sudden a patchwork city. And This is the same kind of legislation they have in the United States. That's absolutely crazy. It creates a lack of uniformity. It creates a bunch of stupidity, and I think they're just setting up for a total handgun ban again.
Oh, 100%.
They couldn't get it with Paul Martin the last time back in, what was it, 2006, 2007, something like that, and he got absolutely crushed in the subsequent election. Although he was ahead in the polls before that, when he brought out the handgun ban thing, it was like, oh goody. That's going to change things. And I can tell you that the polls are going to be different as more and more people become aware of what this Liberal government is trying to do to people in terms of authoritarian crap, control, and taking away people's property. And I'm talking hundreds of thousands of dollars from individuals.
Well, you think about some of these collectors and for how long they've been in the game. These guys have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of firearms in their possession, right? And all of a sudden, the government's going to give them pennies on the dollar for these, apparently. And it's a huge investment they've made in this that's going to be ultimately worthless to them. Or again, like you said, what do? Do they rent a spot in another city where they allow handguns?
Or move to the country. And the other thing that this is really about is about culture killing. This is about woke run amok. If you want guns, then you're done, right? This is about trying to completely destroy our cultural heritage. I mean, firearms sports, firearms shooting activities, hunting, shooting sports, all of that are much more popular than hockey in Canada. Yep. And I don't think they understand the depth of strong feelings about people and how they feel about their firearms, right? This isn't a fooling around thing.
Yep. Well, and like you said, Sheldon, they're going for the big grab here. So when you look at the notes on C21, I went through them with Shane Getson last night on my live stream, and the language that they put in there is so broad and general that it just that they're looking at actually going by the definition of an assault rifle and prohibiting that versus prohibiting makes and models of rifles, which if they say this is what it's going to look like, this is an assault rifle, you can't have it. Well, that just gets rid of everything.
Well, this goes back to Kim Campbell's points system that she had back in her Bill C-17, where she had points assigned to different features of different firearms. And if you had so many points, then this was a candidate for being prohibited or restricted, depending on the point structure. And we demonstrated that, like a Jungle Carbine 303 actually got a whole bunch of points on this, and it's insanity. But you got to remember, they're doing this quite purposefully. It's ideological. It's intended to destroy our heritage and our culture. And it is not something that anybody can put up with. It is, as I said on an earlier broadcast, this is tyranny.
Yeah.
It isn't anything but tyranny.
There's one point in that C21 that actually hammers that message home. And it's the fact that when it comes to gangs and gang violence, in this whole mess that they're creating, they've committed $250 million over 5 years to the gang issues in this move against firearms that they're making. 60% or more of the homicides committed with firearms are by gangs. So they're taking 60+ % of the problem they're trying to solve, and they're throwing maybe 5% of the money they're going to spend at that problem.
Well, and the other thing is firearms violence is not a major issue in Canada. If you look at violence in Canada, it's by fists, it's by blunt objects. It is not by firearms. This is not a thing. It's never been a thing. And this really has never been about crime control. It's always been about civil disarmament and getting the guns. That's what this really is.
And again, to your point, when you look at the statistics as far as, problems we should be solving goes, firearm violence wouldn't even make the top 20 of things we should be looking at. I mean, if what's important is the sanctity of human life for these people, then they should be focusing on opioids. They should be focusing on alcohol abuse. They should be focusing on all these things, but they're zeroing in on this minuscule issue that, and not only that, but they're zeroing in on the people who are 0% of the problem for that issue that they're focused on, right?
If they want to solve crime problems in Canada, what they need to do is get people back to work.
Yeah.
What they need 100%. To do is quit destroying small town, small business Canada, and get those families back to work. This is an attempt to destroy the family structure. I had a conversation today with a friend of mine. He took me out for lunch, and he said, this is about John Lennon's Imagine. That's the anthem of the woke. Imagine a world with no religion, where everything is wonderful and happy, and you start looking around, and my God, that's exactly what this is about.
Yeah.
You can go shop in a big box store, but you can't go to church. You can go congregate in a big protest rally for the Flavor Aid cause of the day, but you absolutely cannot, have a full family dinner at your own house.
Yeah.
What is this really about? It's about breaking down the family structure. It's about destroying the small business, middle class economy. And really, it's an attempt to completely restructure our economy based on a woke socialist view of the world.
Well, and when you look at the solution they're proposing and creating for this problem, it's absolutely off base. And the other piece is, constitutionally, like the right to peacefully assemble, for example. Okay, so they're stomping on our constitutional rights here under the premise that there's provisions within the Constitution for them to do that. Well, guess what? I'm under 60. If I'm under 60, I am 10 times more likely to die from suicide than I am from COVID. 10 times more likely. And what have they done? They've taken away gyms, they've taken away gatherings with family and friends, and they've left us with alcohol, drugs, and fast food. Right? Like, you're creating a mental health crisis. Well, you're exacerbating the crime problem, right?
It's absolutely correct. I had dinner with a friend of mine yesterday evening who's a social worker in healthcare. And her complaint about this is that we're basically doing everything that is the worst possible thing for marginalized people.
Yep.
Anyone who's elderly or, say, poverty-stricken, you're isolating them, making them more and more lonely, making them more and more depressed, and giving them much more of a situation in which they're more likely to pass away out of just simply being lonely.
Yep.
And she's furious about it. She says that their family members who are watching their parents and their grandparents and so on pass away in this really should be considering lawsuits against government, which has put these strictures on people under the auspices of pretending to keep them safe, and yet at the same time doing everything they can, which puts their health at risk.
Well, and back to the restructuring piece, it just so happens that in the midst of all of this, they're slamming through all this gun legislation, right? They've got us weak, they've got us distracted, they've got us concerned, they've got us poor and unemployed, and then boom, hit us with the firearm stuff, right?
Well, you can't re-engineer society while people have firearms and are able to stand up and say no. And I mean, we took a bit of guff from some of the woke left yesterday about some comments I made about the French Revolution related to another conversation. I get people talking.
If you're ticking off the woke left, you're doing it right.
Well, that's what I thought. We were talking about the suggestion I was given about putting things together with metalwork and woodworking skills. And it occurred to me that they're complaining about the wrong thing. When people are having those conversations and are thinking that way, well, maybe they really ought to think about what they're doing, because what they're doing is clearly causing a problem.
Yep.
They're economically destroying the fabric of Canadian society, and they can't do anything to push their agenda farther than they really already have without getting the guns. And that's what they're up to. They want the guns.
Well, I've been fortunate through this whole thing. I mean, we've been okay, but I work in the oil industry, right? This is my livelihood. This is all the people I know. That's their livelihood, and the amount of people who've been unemployed and who are suffering, and they keep throwing them this government money, and it's just like, guys, just turn back the businesses on. Like, just bring it back. There's the solution to the problem, right?
Well, they don't understand. You see, the problem is you've got all of these folks who have these good government jobs, and they're paid this money. They've got a relatively protected income. And they're busy telling everybody else, well, shut down, stop working, don't get paid, don't pay your rent, all this, and we'll give you more government money because there's lots of money in the government. Well,
it's
hang
infinite.
on a second here. There isn't if those people who are supposed to be working and producing in the economy are not doing that.
Yep.
Because all of a sudden, when the tax dollars come in and there's nothing there because there's no income, Well, all of those government jobs start to have to get cut and fade away, and the debt increases, and that's not sustainable.
Well, and every dollar so in the first 150 years of Canada, we accumulated roughly $600 billion worth of debt. And by the end of 2021, between 2016 and 2021, Trudeau will have doubled that.
Yeah.
And it's, every single dollar we take from the government that's not coming out of revenues is a dollar my children are going to have to pay back through higher taxes, through less luxury in their lives, through less of a livelihood. Like, that's who it's going to squash here. That's who's going to suffer, right?
Oh, I completely agree with you, Rob. And like we were pointing out, none of this is possible in a society that is not compliant, does not go along with this crap, or maybe has some questions that are being stifled on things like social media. Like, you can't just tell people this is how it is, shut up and put up, and expect that that's going to be okay. I mean, this COVID thing, everybody keeps saying, well, it'll be over by Christmas, it'll be over by summer, it'll take 2 weeks, whatever. This is going to go on for 3 to 5 years, probably, if not longer.
It's roughly a month away from the first anniversary of 2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Exactly. What are you going to wear for that day, Rob?
Oh, I don't know, man. I don't know.
I'm wearing an extra 20 pounds.
COVID weight.
I'm gonna get a special mask for that day. Happy anniversary or something. I don't know.
I got this little red Pioneer bandana because I think everybody be having to wear one by then. Maybe Blake Brown and Pam Damoff have already got theirs, but here it is right there, right? The little red Pioneers, bunch of crap.
But the C21 stuff now, like the things that are really, I don't want to say frightening me, but it is scary stuff what's happening here. So when you look at the red flag and the yellow flag piece, they're setting it up so virtually anybody on the face of the planet can call and have me red flagged. And the scary part is that, I'm pretty public with my opinions. I've posted photos of me with firearms and gear and all kinds of stuff. And I get comments that people are saying that, you're the last person I'd want to see with a firearm. Uh-oh. Right. And it's just like, if anybody knows me, I'm a very logical, rational, reasonable, peaceful person. But those people could make some phone calls and get me in a lot of trouble and create a lot of legal problems for me just because they felt like it.
That's the goal of this, though, isn't it? This creation of a so-called rat line to cause problems for people. What's the other term for it? Doxing. Yep. Or there's another phrase, I can't remember what it is, but what, Jordan, do you remember?
No, but I just wanted to jump in. What really troubles me is they don't even have to be in Canada to report you.
Yeah, they could be in Holland.
Yeah, that boggles my mind. Like, where's the immediate danger? You can't take your gun. If you have the proper paperwork, you can go to the airport with your firearm and travel with it, but you're going through customs. I'm sure when you go through customs, your answer is not going to be, hey, I'm going over to cause, troubles, right? Like, what does somebody in another country have to worry about somebody in Canada? And our pages are being watched in North America. They're being watched all over. We have people from Australia watching us. We have people from New Zealand watching us to see what's going on with the firearms down here. If somebody from those areas says, "Hey, let's what do they call it? Swatting." That's
the term. Swatting and doxing.
Yeah,
exactly what I was trying to remember.
Let's have fun with it, and here you got somebody from down under going, hey, this person does not need a firearm. Well,
or they get triggered, right?
Well, and it's a wink and a nod between the liberals and the anti-gunners, and it's the same thing they're doing with social media. So social media is getting all this pushback about shutting down free speech and everything. And what does Trudeau and his heritage minister come out with? They're going to squash free speech they're going to give the social media platforms all of the ammunition they need to shut down whoever they want, completely outside of anything that qualifies as hate speech or anything like that. So it's the same thing. This is a handshake between those two groups.
Well, it's more than a handshake.
Yeah.
The anti-gun groups are fellow travelers with their counterparts in the United States. I've seen these guys, at the United Nations. They're all getting together, and they've got their little clique, and they very much share their information, and they don't understand the laws as they are to some extent. So they ask for things we already have, like red flag laws. We already have the ability to report on people that are problematic. What they're doing it now is they wanted to use the term because it's a sexy marketing term. And so they looked at it and they went, oh, we already have red flag laws. Well, let's just make it even stronger. We're going to have yellow flag laws and we're going to have red flag laws. I think what we need on this is a big frickin' checkered flag and put a screaming halt to it.
Well, and they use some very concerning language in this. So they state anyone could contact a CFO with information about a license holder. That's as broadly as they frame it. Anyone on the face of the planet. Geez, they could be they could be on Mars and they could call, right? And have your firearms taken away from you.
Or it could be that guy who phoned me from Service Canada telling me that I was being arrested because my social insurance number had been flagged today. He may decide that my response wasn't to his liking and could thus have a complaint filed against me.
Yeah. It's a huge win for the anti-gun lobby. That piece right there.
Well, they haven't won yet.
Well, yeah, it hasn't gone through yet, and hopefully it doesn't. But this is what they're trying to push through. Is like I said, it's that they're giving them a gift.
Well, and then you look at the whole airsoft thing and the pellet guns and all this. If this is really crazy about crime, okay, tell me how it's dangerous for somebody to have an airsoft gun, even if they were engaged in crime. Are they going to kill anybody with the airsoft gun? Not unless they literally use it as a club and beat someone to death with it. That's it. And I mean, this is completely crazy.
Well, it's the same line of thinking back in the early 1900s when women had to completely cover up. It's all based on appearance and what it's going to intrigue people to do. So they see these airsoft rifles. They look like scary rifles to them. And they think, well, if somebody has that, they might think of doing something to somebody. It might make them violent just by the nature of that object.
One of my left-wing colleagues, I teach at a community college, my day job, this is a volunteer thing for me, said to me one time, he says, well, I don't think people should have guns. And I said to him, well, why not? Well, he said, if I had one, I might shoot someone. And I looked at him and I said, well, then you shouldn't have a gun.
Right.
Like, really? That's how that's the mentality of these guys, right?
Well, and there's a huge element of projection with these people. So these people attend to, when it comes to a lot of these things, these folks that are pushing this ideology, they can't trust themselves, or they think they have terrible thoughts themselves, and they think you and I are thinking the same things. When I'm a healthy person, I don't think about terrible things.
Exactly. Jordan, I'm sorry I interrupted. You were going to say something.
No, I'd just be curious to actually look into how many crimes have been committed with a paintball gun or one of these airsoft guns.
Well, that doesn't matter though, right? You see, I always hear people say, well, no crime has ever been committed with firearm X. And well, then you can say, well, why are you attacking this firearm? No crime has ever been committed with it. And then tomorrow somebody commits a crime with it, and your whole argument is torpedoed. So that is an irrelevant consideration.
No, but for this to come up, for this to come up though on the government's radar, like there must have been.
It's cultural.
Something.
It's cultural. They don't want kids to be brought into the firearms culture, the firearms community. They don't want them playing tactical games.
I mean, somebody's going to have to get in contact with like Activision or something, because all those games are going to be on the list very shortly.
Well, and it's that Overton window, and they're jamming it in their direction, right? They're pushing it and pushing it, and all of these little bits and pieces are steps in that direction. How do we get to a point in society where 15 years ago, my views probably would have been liberal views, but now I'm actually hard right by everybody else's standard? Because they've shifted that Overton window so far that if you're a liberal back in the day, you're an extremist right now.
That is so accurate. I talked to I've been at the college where I teach almost 28 years now, and in one of the departments that I'm I'm in two departments. I'm in history and in English. A lot of my colleagues, I would have thought 15 years or so ago, were fairly left liberal.
Mhm.
And now they have been pushed by the whole cancel culture, woke nonsense, the attacks on what they teach and how they teach it, their view on everything, and even in some cases their view on firearms. They have been pushed so hard that they're going, wait a minute, you're telling me that I have to be this, well, and I'm not that way, so I'm going
Yep.
to the right more.
Yep.
So I'm seeing them go from their sort of comfortable centrist position to be having to say, well, if you think that I'm giving up my whatever firearm, or that I can't do this anymore, or I can't use these books in my classes, well, this isn't okay, and I'm not going to put up with this. And screw you.
Yep.
I do not support the woke left or that liberal cancel culture mentality that says you must tear down culture and to build up this new utopia, which they're really working hard at doing.
Yep.
Frankly.
Yeah. And these same people, 15 years ago, they're probably just as progressive now as they ever were. But again, it's just that window's shifted so far that if you're remotely progressive right now, you're actually hard right compared to how progressive everybody else thinks they are.
Yeah, well, and that's it, right? You've got this very strange dynamic where if you're not out there virtue signaling and trying to show how woke and wonderful you are, and you're not saying, well, guns are bad and all this, well, then somehow you're evil. You're a tyrant. You're the devil. You're whatever. And I'm sorry, I've never been the devil or a tyrant or anything like that. But I know what a tyrant looks like when I see one. I mean, I'm a historian. I've read about tyrants for a very long time. And when I see rule by decree, order in council used with great liberal effect,
Yep.
and this getting the guns to engage in a great reset, well, I'm sorry. I have a problem with this.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. So before we came on the show, we kind of had like a little talk, and we were talking about that podcast that was this morning. It was out from BC. The miseducation that's going on, it blows my mind. Like, they had this gentleman, I'm not going to name him. They had this gentleman come on, and like when I listened to it, I went, that could not be any more wrong than it's just so wrong. Like, he was just so misinformed that, he was saying, like, you don't need an AR-15 to hunt a deer, and it's this super high power rifle, and when you hit it in the head just explodes. and I'm thinking, like, okay,
completely ignorant and stupid.
They're varmint rounds, man.
Like, first of all,
I've got a 300 Win Mag in my gun cabinet. If they're scared of an AR-15 man, they got something coming to them.
I knew there was something I liked about you, because I too am a 300 Win Mag guy. What are you shooting? You're a Remington guy, Winchester, what?
I'm kind of right now. I'm building the collection right now.
Excellent.
So I was into it when I was younger with my father. I grew up on a farm, and it was just a way of life for us. Like, coyote hunting. Just trying to keep all the farm animals safe, and we were out every night, every weekend. We were out rabbit hunting. Like, it was a lifestyle. And I never ever got into guns recreationally. It was something that was, it was just mandatory growing up on a farm, is that you're familiar with these things. And,
Yep.
you're a kid, and dad's saying, grab the 410 and go shoot that pheasant. Right. So you fast forward, I had kids, and I grew up, and I started saying, you know what, like, I'd really like to get back into this. And
you grew up and had kids, or had kids and then grew up?
I grew up and had kids, actually. Okay. We actually held off pretty good. I didn't start till I was in my late 20s. So
there you go.
I tried to be smart about it, but now I'm going to be an old man with young kids. So I don't know if that's a good thing. But, and I just said, you know what, let's start collecting. And I've just been gathering up what feels good to me right now. Because again, I've only ever used 303, 308, 22, stuff like that, right? So I'm actually really unfamiliar with all of these different platforms right now. Because again, we just used the basics on the farm growing up, right? So it's and I'm building the collection fast here too. My wife's been very nice to me.
Very good. It's good to hear. Well, anyway, getting back to Jordan's point about this CBC expert from FFU, I mean, this guy is clearly not an expert. He's just a fellow with an opinion, which happens to be palpably and obviously demonstrably wrong. and
very uninformed. Like he was really he was not informed at all. He was still talking about, we're walking around with our handguns in public and a high powered 9mm, like just
high powered handguns, man. Like, have you seen a 9mm round? Those things are tiny, man.
This gentleman could not be any more wrong, and I don't know the vetting process of their staff over there, but they really screwed that one up.
Well, no, they want somebody who's going to toe that line and be sensational and scare everybody, right?
It's a marketing thing. They're there to promote a narrative that has to do with the destruction of our culture, our way of thinking, our ideas, the things we like to do. This, we used to play a game when we were children, called what was it? One of those herbivores with horns that produce milk, and persons who deal with them, and Indigenous First Nations people, right? Or in short form, we called it cowboys and Indians.
Yeah.
And kids used to go around and go bang, 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 and play with their cap guns and make war whoops and all this, or play cops and robbers was the other thing. Well, you don't see that anymore. You don't see that whole morality stuff that was taught on the old television shows like Gunsmoke and Bonanza and Combat, or Hogan's Heroes is a little more out there, I suppose. But you used to see this kind of a moral grounding based on that great generation that fought the Second World War, and that all seemed to go poof in the 1970s with the reaction to the Vietnam War, all of that stuff that went on in the United States with the civil rights movement, the various assassinations, a few high-profile shootings. We had one or two in Canada as well. And there was this great knee-jerk reaction that, we've got to get the guns away and change society. I think Senator Sharon Carstairs said it many years ago, that gun control was the first step in re-engineering Canadian society into a liberal view. And this is what they're trying to do. And the thing they've done here is they've gone very, very quickly with a lot of stuff because they're impatient about what the changes that they want to make. They pushed Trump out of the White House down south. They're on this roll. They're trying to push this woke cancel culture agenda, and they need to get the guns to do it.
Yep. Now, back to that CBC piece, Jordan. I don't know if you got the same vibe as me, but I almost had goosebumps when that Dustin guy got on there and just
he was
the criminologist.
He mashed him.
It was beautiful, man.
Right. The other gentleman that came on that pointed out that they kept saying weapon. I don't know if you took account of how many times he said weapon.
I did.
But no, firearm. It's firearm, not weapon.
Yeah, both he and the host kept referring to them as weapons over and over.
This is the liberal narrative. They've been given a talking point. And I watched Bill Blair do this. I watched him.
He does it all the time.
Almost said firearm at one of the times in minute. He was he said, and these weapons, right? He was going to say firearm, but he remembered, they told me I can't say firearm. I have to say weapon because I have to build this narrative that it's a weapon. And I mean, are firearms weapons? Well, sure, if they're used as them.
Yeah.
If you use it in self-defense.
My broom is a weapon if I use it as a weapon.
Yeah, but
golf clubs, knives, a bat, your fist, your car.
Yeah.
There are so many different
broadswords. Anything like that could be a weapon.
He just broadsword. Here we go.
He just has one lying around, right?
Broadsword. Here we go.
I dare say Sheldon's ready for action at any moment in time.
Rob, you really have no idea, do you? I really got to come up to Fort McMurray for a visit sometime. I think we should hang out. I think it'd be a really cool time.
Yeah.
But they really destroyed this guy's narrative because it's an easy narrative to destroy. And any of us in the firearms community can attack and destroy these narratives when you use facts, when you use evidence. And there's lots of it that supports our positions. The problem for us is the antis, the liberals, the socialists. These people do not care about facts. They don't care about history. And I see distortions of history being used all the time to try to attack us.
Yep.
I mean, I have a graduate degree in history. as one of our fans does, I know out there who likes to try and take runs at us and attack us in social media, and that's very nice. But I think that the history is not something to be taken lightly. There are different interpretations of history. People can read things different ways and come up with different reasons for it. And there's a whole collective body of work on a whole series of topics, and like there is on firearms, and that's available to us. And these are the strongest weapons we have in fighting back.
Yeah.
But remember, they don't care about the facts.
Yep.
It's emotion.
Well,
all of their arguments are emotionally based.
And you look at the reemergence of the conversations around communism that are taking place in society, and it blows my mind that people are comfortably out there talking about that. To me, that's on the same level as Nazism. When you start talking communism, like when you look at history, when you look at what's happened with these regimes and the fact that, it's only ever resulted in an authoritarian, totalitarian, leader who's murdered hundreds of millions of people. But people are like, well, yeah, they just didn't do it right. Then that's the argument over and over again.
I know. And I get, usually you're the first one to bring up, when you're the first one to bring up the fascist regimes of the 1930s, you lose your argument.
Yeah.
So the thing I always like to point out is that this is, as you said, totalitarianism. This is authoritarianism. It doesn't matter what color of uniform they're wearing or what armband they have on, whether it's all red or red and black and white or green and white and red or anything like this. This is all about power and control of the masses.
Yep.
And we probably respectfully, understandably want to have some measure of societal community and growth and cooperation so that we can all grow as a nation, as a country, as a community. But we don't need this social re-engineering of culture.
Yeah.
We don't need this cancellation of our history and reinterpretation of it to try to fit this woke virtue signaling agenda that seems to be resplendent. And again, it's all about getting the guns.
Yeah.
Get the guns first, and then you can do all this stuff.
Yeah.
But people say, well, it can't happen here. Well, they said that about Rwanda. They said it about Srebrenica. The former Yugoslavia hosted the Olympic Games, for God's sakes. And then
I recently dove into some history around Rwanda, and that is what a nightmare. Was it 1 million people in 100 days?
Yeah, at least 800,000 to possibly 1 million or more, and mainly hacked to get death with machetes and knives. Yep. But they had a UN force there that very well could have used a bit of more initiative than they otherwise had, and gone in and seized weapons stockpiles, which they were aware of.
Yep.
But no.
When you look at the way the conversation had shifted, and the stuff being transmitted over the radio, just demonizing these people, and like they ramped up a whole country against this minority, and all of a sudden the dam broke, and bang, you get 800,000 to 1 million people murdered in 100 days.
Well, it's interesting how they're trying to focus the narrative on us, Rob, and I think that's where we were going with this. Is all of a sudden who's being demonized?
Yeah.
You go on one of our programs, you say something, and all of a sudden you're attacked on social media by the usual suspects, right?
Yeah.
It's a setup play. It's a game to demonize our culture, to demonize our interests, our behavior, our activities. It's the attack on hunting, right? The whole vegan, woke, go after the guns thing there as well.
Well, and everything they're doing is besides the fact. I mean, there's not a single thing they're doing that solves the problem they state they're trying to solve. And this is very obvious to everybody engaged. It's very obvious to the leaders that are pushing it. And it's just this big lie that they keep telling over and over again. And you've got people towing that line now, people buying into it.
It's a marketing exercise, right?
Yep.
They recognize that if they actually say, well, we're re-engineering society and we're going to destroy your culture, and also we want to steal all your property, that probably won't sell. But if you say it's about public safety, okay. It's about public safety. But, it's been about public safety for hundreds of years. And anybody who starts saying, I'm from the Committee of Public Safety, needs to be viewed with a great deal of suspicion.
Yep.
because it's not about public safety they're concerned about. It's about their own.
It's crazy. When you dive back into this C-21 stuff, it's like, again, the piece with the $250 million over 5 years, $50 million a year, focused on over 60% of the problem, right? Gang violence. It's absolutely insane to me, and it's a travesty that these communities that are suffering, that's all the funding they get. But they're going to take all of these folks with firearms who are legally using them and spend billions of dollars taking their firearms away, and just leave these communities just completely out of luck and still suffering. Because $50 million throughout all of Canada in gang-ridden areas is going to do nothing.
It's not.
It's going to do zero things, right?
When you listen to the people who are involved in working with young offenders, as I did for a number of years when I was a relief worker at Camp Trapping, a residential youth young offenders attendance program. The thing that seems to make the most difference is poverty alleviation.
Yeah.
Provide economic opportunities for jobs. If you've got work and people can do something of value, that keeps them out of the drug environment, it keeps them out of the hopelessness, it gives them a sense of belonging, and it takes away anything that they would find in a gang.
Yeah.
So what are we doing going around and just throwing money at a problem? In fact, a lot of this money stuff enables bad behavior. I see things like needle exchanges and so on. This doesn't help.
Well, and this the terrible thing is that the government's measure of doing something is how much money they spend. There's no measure of quality.
Yeah.
There's no qualitative measure of the programs and the work they're doing. They just say, hey, we spent $300 billion, therefore we did everybody a big favor. But it's like, okay, through COVID, it was over $300 billion. I guarantee you 1/5 of that entered the pockets of Canadians.
Yeah, and a lot of it just went up in smoke or disappeared or went into fat cat contracts to government friends. We all know how that money got spent.
Yep.
We.
When you're spending,
Right.
close to $500 billion, you could hide many billions of dollars in the numbers really easily. Right?
Yeah, it's just a digit on a balance sheet.
Yep.
And when you're busy sliding money to family members or to others who are involved in supporting your project by giving families and friends contracts, well, I'm sorry, this is abuse of the public trust. This is not fulfilling their fiduciary responsibility as the stewards of our country. It's reprehensible what they're doing.
Well, to everybody out there watching this happen, they are directly harming my children and their future with the moves they're making. That's what this government is doing right now. They're making it more difficult. My children are going to have less success. There's going to be way higher taxes in the future to pay for this stuff. I mean, you can't double the debt over a 5-year period and not expect higher taxes. We were paying $20 billion a year to maintain our debt previous to this spending spree.
Exactly.
So, and we were running $20 billion deficits indefinitely. Well, guess what? They doubled the debt. So when things go back, we're going to be running $40 billion deficits indefinitely now.
The biggest expense in our federal budget is servicing the national debt.
Yeah.
It's criminal. This is why they want to reset the economy.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine if I got to reset my economy? Let's say I'm going to go out and buy a house, a couple of cars, maybe some more firearms. Hey, let me do that. Well, then I'm just going to go, you know what? It's time for a reset. I need to reset everything to zero so I have a zero balance, and it'll all be good. Oh, but of course, I won't own anything. None of this will be mine. I won't actually own my house because it'll be a government. I can use it, but if they
and Sheldon, they said very forcefully, you will own nothing and you will be happy.
Oh well, I
don't know what kind of drugs they're going to give me, but if they want me to own nothing and be happy, it's going to have to be a lot.
George Orwell had it that it was going to take a long time to do this back when he was writing about it in 1984. I think Kafka had it better that it was going to be an awful lot quicker, and it seems to be happening pretty fast.
Well, have you read into Yuri Bezimov? Now, I don't want to get conspiracy minded here, but he's a Russian. He's a defector from Russian, and he back in the 80s, he was talking about a multi-decade strategy called ideological subversion. And what it was an effort to destabilize your enemy, and in this case being the Western world. And what he was talking about in the 80s is what's happening right now, right before our eyes.
Yeah.
And, and when I start imagining, how these things play out and how they work, I mean, what he says makes a lot of sense. Now, if you think of a country like China, multi-trillion-dollar economy, a lot on the line, it would be nothing for them to spend $100 billion running an ideological subversion program to weaken their enemies and strengthen themselves, right? So theoretically, this all makes sense. But again, it comes back to Yuri Bezumov was saying it's a multi-decade strategy. This isn't something that happens in 10 years. This is 20, 30, 40 years, right?
In practical terms, the strategy has been very simple: buy Chinese. And that's what we've all been doing. Everything we're getting, buying, making, using has been manufactured in China out of resources extracted from our ground, shipped over there to have other people build things. We used to have a manufacturing sector in Canada. We used to have a textiles sector in Canada, and we used to make good quality stuff. And now we're buying all of these things because it's so inexpensive. What a great deal! I can buy more stuff, and I'm going to fill up my house with all this Chinese-made stuff. And the Chinese are making a lot of money off of us, and we're not making that money. Our economy is going to collapse because of what we're doing, and we're going to be in a really big, rough time.
Yeah.
And I remember watching the shelves at the beginning of this pandemic in the stores, how they were getting so empty so fast. And I looked at this and I went, "Wow, welcome to socialism, everybody. How do you like it so far?"
Now they've got something else in this C21, which is the new offense for altering cartridge magazines. So you can go to prison apparently for 5 years now if the rivet falls out of your magazine.
Well, yeah, and this is a double jeopardy offense because it's already an offense to have what they call their unaltered overcapacity limit magazines, what we would normally call standard capacity magazines, and then you tack an extra offense onto that for having one that has been altered or that you've altered. Now that's two offenses. You get two for one. Well, I mean, you could probably have a manslaughter charge against you and not get some of the time they're talking about for these administrative, nonsensical, nonviolent firearms offenses. It's a ridiculous construct.
Yeah, and when they're talking about, I don't know, like I was watching the presser with Blair and Trudeau, and they kept throwing this word registry around for the firearms that you don't want to give up. There's going to be new storage requirements, and you're going to have to register them, they kept saying. And I couldn't help but think that that's a really sneaky way they slid in another gun registry.
It's back.
Oh, the registry is definitely back in this, but it also includes your airsoft guns. It includes your probably paintball, some BB guns, and everything else. I mean, the pellet pistols, anything that closely resembles an actual firearm.
To the airsofters and paintballers, welcome to the fight.
and welcome to the NFA, and we're proud to support you guys. And
absolutely.
You can see on our website we've got a welcoming letter to you about that, and we're more than happy to support the airsoft.
NFA.ca, go check us out. And there's a letter out there. Rob, I just want to loop back to what you're saying about the registry. What's really interesting to me, and I'm paying really close attention to this, is you have to register your non-restricted firearms now. And Bill Blair said many times they couldn't give you an exact figure of the buyback because they don't know how many firearms are out there because they're not registered. They're long guns.
Yeah.
I'll put money down on this. They're gonna do this, register it. You get a prohib license, and a year down the road, 2 years, probably sooner. Guess what? We decided it's probably not a good idea for you to hold on to them. Now it's a forced buyback.
Yep.
Anybody who registers guns needs to understand the only purpose for a firearms registry is confiscation, and anybody who registers is a sucker.
Yeah,
that's what it is. If you're going to register your guns, you're setting them up to be seized by the government later. If you keep them and don't register them, and the government finds you have them, they're going to seize your guns. So what does it matter, right?
No.
You're going to lose your stuff anyway. They're going to try to send you to jail anyway. They're trying to stomp on your life, your culture, your belief structure. It's not okay.
Yeah, we're not lawyers, so please consult your lawyer first before we're not advocating for you to break any law. That the NFA does not do that. So consult your lawyer, understand what you are doing first, and work within the law so we can defeat this law.
Absolutely.
So something else I found interesting, and this is something I haven't observed. This again back to virtue signaling. Limit the glorification of violence in firearms marketing and sales. I don't see that. That doesn't exist to me.
That's interesting.
Well, it does if it's an anti-self-defense law, Rob.
Yeah.
If you're promoting tactical games, if you're promoting self-defense, if you're doing anything which could conceivably talk about violence against a person, then you're all of a sudden subjected to a very serious criminal charge. So this is a business activity. So, for example, if you were somebody who promoted self-defense and had self-defense training, which arguably promotes violence against another person, well, then you're subject to be charged because, we don't do self-defense because self-defense is a government franchise. You have a problem, you call the government. We'll be there. Well, tell it to somebody in northern Alberta who's, 40 miles away from any center where there's a police station, that the Mountie might get there in a week or something. And you've got to deal with the problem as it is at the time.
There's a musician now. I'm into rap, and I know probably a lot of people in the community are not. But there's a guy by the name of Tom McDonald who's a very conservative musician. His father actually lives in Fort McMurray here. I'm a huge fan of him, and I was listening to one of his songs today. He said in the song, he said, "Order takeout and call the police and see which arrives at your house first." Right?
Yeah, well, there you have it. I mean, we're living in dangerous times, and we're being subjected to the politics of panic. We're being subjected to the politics of pandemic panic, and we're being attempted to be restructured, recrafted, reset, and none of this is acceptable. And this Bill C-21 is just a tool to try to shift our culture on an ideological basis. And what we all need to do as Canadians is to make sure that we completely crush this Liberal government in the next election by looking very carefully at who's most likely to do that and make it happen. And Rob, I got something for you. It's kind of being virtually given. I'll just see if I can put it up for everybody to see.
I'll reach out and grab it.
Yeah. Okay. Here, we'll do this. Yeah.
Awesome.
So this is our National Firearms Association challenge coin. They're awarded at the discretion of officers of the NFA to people who have performed above and beyond, and it has our official heraldic coat of arms. The motto on it is "In Defense of Freedom," the motto of the National Firearms Association. On the reverse is our crest, which is a Canadian crown with crossed rifles, and Canada's National Firearms Association. Every one of these coins is numbered to the holder, and the number on your coin, which we'll make sure you get as soon as possible, is 218. And normally this is presented with a handshake. So I'll just do a virtual handshake with you here. Here's your coin, Rob. Yeah. And I flip it over, and you have it, and it's in your hand, and there we go. If we'd set this up beforehand, you'd had a coin in your hand, and you'd have gone, "Wow, that's awesome!"
It's a little magician trick here.
And then we could say it's never been done before, or something smart like that.
Well, thank you very much, Sheldon. I appreciate that.
You're most welcome, Rob. I really enjoy your what you've been doing for the community, and I mean, you've got a great pithy way of getting to the meat of the issue that I think everybody appreciates. Some of us get a little bit long a tooth about some of this stuff, but I certainly appreciate everything you're doing, and it's been really great getting to know you here on the program today. And like I said, anytime you're in Prince George, please look me up. I'll be glad to show you around, and I hope that I get up to Fort McMurray sometime, and maybe I can have a chat with some of the folks up there and see how things are going.
Well, and I can't say enough about you guys. The support I've gotten, and working closely with Jordan here, I've enjoyed every bit of it. And I'm into firearms, but it really comes down to rights and freedoms for me. And this is just such a huge violation of rights and freedoms in my mind.
Yep.
that this is the big push for me right now. So I'm just looking forward to continuing to support this community and doing anything I can to help get that message out. Right. This is what I love to do. And you guys have just really helped me get even better and have an even bigger reach than I had before. So appreciate everything you have done.
Well, keep up the great work in defense of freedom, Rob. We all appreciate everything you've been doing.
Thank you.
So I think tonight we're going to leave it at that. Sheldon, thanks for joining me. Rob, same. Thanks for joining me. Everyone out there, thank you for tuning in. This has been another episode of NFA Talk. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of NFA Talk. Like and follow the NFA on social media and sign up to become a member.